All right. Here we are, Thanksgiving week, the one and only time of the year where we do an in-person podcast, which
A
I think is
destination pod, if you will.
destination podcast. So, okay. Well, here we are, Mr. Jacobs, not resident, but honorary Floridian.
Mm.
Um,
No longer. I was for several years, but
that's true.
yeah,
That's true.
recently gave it up.
Probably for the best, honestly. So,
I would have
update
felt
us.
bad if we lost, if the abortion measure fell short by one vote, but it did not. So
3%,
not
though.
vote,
Honestly, a
3%.
lot. I mean, I thought it would pass,
I
but
was
pretty
surprised
close.
it didn't, but pretty close. Yeah.
I'm not to talk politics, but why not? It's like,
It's this week's legal case topic
sure,
section.
sure, sure. I mean, overwhelming 57%, when so what's that mean? You've got a basically 14, 15% of people who voted for Trump voted for the abortion measure. I think that's pretty significant.
Hmm.
So we'll see. I'm sure it'll be on the ballot in 2 years. I
Yep.
would imagine it'll be a campaign issue in the governor race. Not anticipate, but I look forward to how Matt Getz will try to answer the question when he inevitably runs for governor in 2 years, since he can't be attorney general. Um, but yeah, I mean, as I told our league member who almost had Matt Getz as a boss, I told him, at least your new boss a little bit, a little bit more reasonable, a little bit easier to look at and deal with.
True.
But not without her skeletons in the closet, sometimes
Yeah, of which
literally.
there are quite a few.
Yeah, we don't want to get into the schools up in
No.
Tallahassee. Anyway, we'll close legal corner. You're welcome to update us on your travels and business ventures. I know it's certainly interesting to some of the folks in the league who are in the startup
Yeah,
world.
no, a lot of exciting things going on in the world. For those of you that don't know, I know last week's pod, we talked about all the exciting developments that have happened over the past 13 years of this league.
Mhm.
I started my second business earlier this year, which probably don't think I talked about on the last pod, but we've got some exciting going ons, huge campaigns coming up. But of course, logistics, supply chain issues continue to be a problem for everybody. And I have spent 2 hours on the phone with UPS today to get a big old project done. But it gave me some good time to take a look at the waiver wire, look at some scoring projections, and I think gave me a chance to really, really get ready to come and make my annual Thanksgiving week appearance. A tradition unlike any other alongside the Detroit and Dallas Thanksgiving Day games.
Yeah. Well, let's start there. Is there any football on TV tomorrow that you find appetizing? Because certainly not Dallas and the Giants. I think everybody in America, no matter where they live, will find a way to eat Thanksgiving dinner or nap
Correct.
or both during that game. Of the other two NFL games, one college game, anything appeal to you?
I mean, listen, I'm interested to watch the Detroit game if for no other reason than I am really enjoying watching Detroit football right now. I think it is so fun to see what kind of offensive schemes they're going to run every week. They have this unlimited supply of weapons that makes it incredibly entertaining. What version of Caleb Williams is going to show up? I think could it choose to be a good appearance? I don't believe it. I think that he's not going to manage it well in the national spotlight as well as a game against Detroit. But I think I don't see myself watching football much after 3:30 p.m. tomorrow. Neither of those games have much attractiveness, regardless whether it's the Cowboys or the Dolphins and the Packers later in the day.
The Dolphins 0-11 in their last 0 for 11, I think, in the last 11 games that they've played where the kickoff temperature is under 40 degrees. I would not bet on the Dolphins. I would probably lean under, and whatever Green Bay money line, or spread you want to take. Um, yeah, I don't. I have no desire to watch what I imagine is the Packers kicking the crap out of the
100%.
Dolphins. I agree with you. I think Detroit's a lot of fun to watch. Bears offense is exciting. You don't know what you're going to get from Caleb Williams play to play. I do think Detroit probably wins that easy going away. They just kind of look like they're a juggernaut right now. I mean, if it's not them and Philly in the NFC Championship game, I don't know what
Right.
happened. Something terribly went wrong. I get it. They're fun to watch. You don't have any Lions on your team. You've got the Cowboys defense, so maybe you should turn in
A nice pickup this week, I think.
Tommy Cutlets. Tommy Cutlets may or may not play. That's a big one.
Which case was it Drew Lock who's their backup now? Second on the depth chart, I think.
Apparently. Look,
Didn't know he was still in the NFL. He might not have known either, quite frankly.
honestly, I don't think he cares.
No.
If you're on an NFL roster as a quarterback, you're making enough money to not care. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's the Giants. We got a lot of Giants fans who, whether they listen to this or not, we know that they're affiliated with the league. It's been an extra rough year. Extra rough.
I, for a franchise that is used to at least much more mediocre performance than
Mhm.
this, it is what an abysmal season to have to be subjected to. I actually, as a Jets fan, feel bad.
Well, look, we all got to watch Hard Knocks in the summer, and we saw how inept their front office was then, and now we're getting to see the results of that inept front office play out. And yeah, I'll leave it at
I
that.
will say on the topic of front office, to talk about New York's other team, I don't remember if this was brought up in our group me at all, which I would also like to say I'm going to motion in the off season that we move to a WhatsApp group from a group me. This is the only thing keeping this app on my phone. But the conversation about Mike Tannenbaum coming in to help the Jets find a new GM is to me one of the most Jetsian decisions I could ever imagine seeing this organization make. And it really leaves me with questions about what spend time with his cousin. Questions about what the hell this franchise is attempting to do. Because all right, we knew you brought in Rodgers to say, all right, we're going to try to be a win now franchise. Cool, whatever, great idea. What are you attempting to accomplish by bringing in someone who you've said, I do not trust your decision making, but help me come in to make this decision and figure this out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Jets should just get Rex Ryan, Mangini. Let's get all of the ghosts of Christmas past together and let's see what they can do. Maybe, honestly, it couldn't really go any worse than it
Mm.
has. Um, look, we'll put our attention on the chat. We'll certainly, you're facing Jordan Love this week in
Mm-hmm.
fantasy. Are you a little worried about your cousin, Mr. Jacobs, up in Green Bay? Are you a little worried about Jordan Love? Little Thanksgiving night, trying to win some turkey legs.
I have felt good. I'll say this. I felt really good about going 3-0 in my division. But if there's one game I'm afraid of, it's this game against Manny. I've been a little bit nervous about this. I think his team has really just had some unfortunate matchups this season. But I feel like they've got a very high ceiling, similarly low floor with a lot of those players. But Jordan Love, again, one of those guys, you don't know what version of him is going to show up week to week. So I will only say that I'm not that nervous because I do think the Packers could end up blowing out the Dolphins and Love either gets pulled or it becomes a rushing game, in which case the Jacobs name does very well while also not affecting me from a fantasy perspective.
All right. Well, let's go. We have a caller, so let's go to the phone lines here. First time, long time. Is this legend from Mobile here calling into the Feinbaum show? Sir,
This is Chris from Fairfax. First time, long time. This is a question for Jacobs here. Who do you think's a better head of a head coaching or leadership search? Do you think it's Mr. T with the Jets or Dick Cheney with the Bush campaign in 2000? I'll hang up and listen.
Can I pick Whoopi Goldberg in the movie Eddie?
you can pick whoever you want. There are no rules. There are no rules.
Situation. No, of those two choices, I will absolutely take Dick Cheney because he really won up the whole system. He said, "I'm just going to pick myself." He got paid to do nothing. How great is
I
that?
mean, look, that can't be any worse than the infighting, the public and private infighting going on that went on with the Trump campaign on who wanted to be Treasury Secretary. The loser got commerce. I mean, I don't know, which is the better or worse jobs in this administration. So, look, if you're going to run a search, you might as well pick yourself in the end. What
100%.
is power if it's not to be used for own personal gain? So,
And we love a hypothesis or a theory that exists to prove itself. So great job there, Dick. Really, he really navigated that well.
yeah, well, the Cheneys are still in the news. So,
Somehow.
yeah, well, let's return back to the fake football field. I mean, what I think is interesting here. Forget the percentages, right? At this point, we know who's good, who's
Mm.
bad, fantasy wise. No buys this week. Everybody's got their full complement of players. There aren't a lot of significant injuries for, I think, really the first time in a while.
Mhm.
There aren't that many big name players that are out at this point of the year, which is a surprise. You've got a nice stranglehold here. You were the first team to clinch a division. I do
Mm.
think that we've gone far enough into this without giving you some kudos. We should do that. Your division is hot garbage, so we
So
should also true. Are you worried at all that you look? Not worried. Let's put it this way: how optimistic are you that you can find a way to sneak into a bye?
I'll say this: if my whole strategy ever since I decided to make a play for it has been I've got to get the first round bye, because I think winning 3 games in the playoffs with my team is not impossible, but I'm kind of like asking for an inside straight against these other lineups. There's a lot of, any given Sunday matchups I've had. Beating you before I made those trades, beating Bodson 2 weeks ago was a great one. But I think to pull off all of those is going to require, quite frankly, everything to break my way in each of those matchups. And especially when you look at the matchups that both you and Bodson have for your players going into weeks 16 and 17 are so favorable that I think I really need that bye, to avoid encountering either of you in the playoffs, because I would get that second seed. Bodson's obviously most likely to be the first, even though he hasn't locked it up yet. And then whoever wins your division is going to be 3, 4, 5, most likely. And my hope is that Wagner wins your division. You end up fourth, so I can avoid you, and you and Bodson beat up on each other.
Yeah.
So I don't love my prospects to win. I do think they exist. I think I need that bye. The only way I get it because of points scored is really going to be if Wagner gets it. I think I'm within about 60 points of Richmond, but it just feels like too much ground to make up in 2 weeks. It's not impossible, but it's going to be tough.
Well, I think that's a good perspective to have. You sit 63 points below Joe. So it's not impossible, but that would be a pretty big margin to make up. Now in Wagner, you've got about a 14-point lead on him. So that's pretty tight. That could flip in 1 week. That's definitely close. I think for you, look, if you win out and you're 10-4, the odds are, I've already played Joe twice. So I don't have the Joe problem, right? I have the Wagner Kirshner. Now the Kirshner problem is that's a potentially explosive team. I don't think I'm going to fall out of the playoffs because the points for is such a significant margin that it's very unlikely. I'd have to lose out. Kirshner has to win out and probably pass me in points, which he could do. He's about 60 points below me. He could certainly pass that. We'll see. So for me, I was thinking about this the other day. I want to be the 2, the 3, or the 6 because I want to avoid Bodson as long as possible. And I think if I'm the 2 or the 3, the odds are overwhelmingly, well, if I'm the 2 or the 3, Joe's going to end up in the 4 or 5. He's got too many points for where Joe's either going to be the 2 or the 4, maybe the 5. But he's probably the 2 or the 4, and I'm probably the 2 or the 4. I'd rather find a way to be the 2 or the 3 or the 6 because you avoid Bodson. And I agree with you. For me, I was always sort of looking ahead. How can I position myself for week 16 and 17? The expectation is that I want to be there. If I get there, I got to have as favorable of matchups as possible. No guarantees, obviously, but got to be prepared. I would say you probably have an inside shot at the 2 because
I've got an easier schedule.
You've got an easier schedule, and if Joe Wagner and I could all go 1-1 here the rest of the way, right? If I beat Wagner, then he beats Joe, and Joe beats Justin this week, then we're all 1-1, and we all end up at 9-5, and you sort of default into the 2. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that outcome. I think I need to win 1 of the next 2 to end up in the 2 or the 3. There's certainly that risk of me ending up in the 4, but I don't know. I haven't done enough analysis on what Joe has or Wagner has or Justin has in terms of schedule, in terms of advantages or matchups. But I know that I want to be, I want to avoid Bodson. I would love the 2. I think losing last week to Joe, where I benched Kittle Sunday morning, trying to get cute, really worried about the Brandon Allen, backup quarterback for the Niners, and then Kittle had a big day. Joe and I both went off. To come in number 2 for the week in points and lose is always heartbreaking. And look, Saquon made it close. Otherwise, it was going to be a blowout. Right. So I don't exactly think I should have won, but could have. And yeah, then if I'm 9-3, I look at it and I go, yeah, I'm basically locked into the 1 or the 2 at this point. But for you gotta. I would put it at like I might give you a 35%, 40% chance to get the 2. There's just enough. All it takes is Joe, Wagner, and I, if we all lose 1,
right,
or then that's
just what I've been hoping for.
And it's definitely doable. I just don't think there's enough separating the 3 teams, the 4 teams in my division. The bottom 5 teams in the league, they're done. They're all eliminated, essentially. I think they're all eliminated. I think we're down to 6 or 7 spots. So
I think Manny might be the only one that's not, because in theory, I think there could be a 7-7 at 6, right?
yeah, I think technically Drew
Barely
and
injured.
Manny
Yeah.
haven't been eliminated from the
But for
playoffs.
all intents and purposes.
I mean, yeah, they would need to both win. They would need to win out,
Yep.
and they would need to make up, probably 150 points or roughly 150 points in 2 weeks.
Fleet Flicker would say they have 100%
Yeah,
chance
yeah,
of making
they'd
the
be getting
playoffs.
right. I mean, obviously the odds of that are pretty low, and we can dive into some of that. But yeah, like I said, kudos. You've clinched your division. Now your focus is, can I secure the best path, the easiest path possible? Um, like I said, I don't mind. I don't want to play the first week of the playoffs, but if I have to, I want to be the 3. I don't think I can be the 6. I just don't.
There's not, no, I don't.
Losing out, I guess I'd have to lose out, and Wagner and Joe have to both go 1-1. I guess then I could be the 6. That would be scary, I think, for whoever's that would be pretty.
If that happens,
That
it's
would be a
likely
pretty
that
brutal side of the bracket. Yeah, if that happens, you're the 2.
Right.
And then, but Lamagna would also have to. I mean, he'd have to win out. I mean, there would be a lot of things that have to happen there. At the end of the day, is get in and then it's all
Worry about it
Yeah,
then.
exactly.
For all those things that are within my control.
So, but looking back on the season here, we're 13 weeks. Well, we're almost 13 weeks in, right? We're 12 weeks in here. You've made some moves. You've taken advantage of some owners who maybe aren't fully up to speed on what happens in the NFL, the modern NFL game. Lots to be thankful for your team. What are some of the players or moments you're most thankful for?
Oh, that's a great question. I will say I'm thankful that Tate's threw in the towel early. And I don't necessarily agree with Paul that it was too early. I think that's an assessment anyone could make in either direction. But it both the knowledge that he was going to do that in one column, and then also the player opportunity he gave me in securing a trade with him is what breathed life into my season after that. Because once I knew he was going away, I never felt a threat from the other 2 teams in our division, and could kind of say, well, somebody has to win this.
Yeah.
So am I going to win this and then end up with the 7th draft pick and make this whole thing pointless? Or I may as well go in and make the best possible path of this I can and try to win the damn thing. And again, the way I look at it is, at least if I get to that 3rd place game, I got a chance to make some money off this, get some points for the power ranking, and call it a day. That really infused the season. And since I've made those trades, haven't lost a game, have only finished outside the top 3 in scoring once. And it's been a hell of a lot of fun to be a part of. So I would say I'm thankful for that, and also Tate's as a trade partner. And I would also say I'm thankful that the Eagles are finally getting their act together. Jalen Hurts has been a real MVP for my team over the past few weeks. Not a great performance last week, but he didn't need to. Devonta Smith figuring out what's going on. I think it's his calf or his hamstring that he's dealing with an injury on. It'd be wonderful if they can get that figured out. But I'm really glad to see that happening. And then also for, the young talent that I took, expecting them to start peaking this late in the season, Khalil Shakir, Zay Flowers, these were the folks I was picking, expecting to say, oh, these might be keepers, and in a year or 2, they're really going to be worthwhile. We got a chance that they might actually pay off for me this season. We've seen it from Flowers in a couple games. He's eclipsed 20 points, I think, at least 2 or 3 times now. So I would say those are a few things that I have a lot of gratitude for this year.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I think you had the right approach. Once it was clear, look, 2 teams in your division, they never really got off the ground. The other one had a lot of assets, but injuries really from the start, derailed it. And it makes sense. There's a vacuum there. Somebody wants to assert themselves, because if not, you end up with the what was it, the 2008 NFC West or whatever.
Right.
You end up with like a below 500 team makes the
7-9
playoffs.
right.
I mean, I'm all for that. I think it makes it, kind of the absurdity of it is interesting, but it's more fun when you have more teams that are competitive, right? I mean, nothing is guaranteed. We can sit here and say, Botson's had a great team all year. I've got a good team. This team's good. That team's good. At the end of the day, you still got to go out there. You got to pick the right players. You got to have them. You got to get lucky.
And we say any given Sunday for a reason, right? And the other part of it I looked at was, I also never had talent that was good enough to trade away for high picks, right? I had a huge win in week 2 or 3 off of Kamara, but that's because Kamara had a crazy game, and no one's going to give me a pick worth the value of his performance on those first 3 weeks. Rightly so. He has not matched that since. So I was like, I'm not going to trade away and get anything that's worthwhile. And even if I could end up with a Tate's issue where I do this, I earn these picks, and then the next season's a loss because all these folks go and get injured. And you know what? I had shitty draft capital this year, and look at the position I'm in. So who knows what can happen.
Well, that's what, we talk about this all the time of, you could have multiple first round picks. This doesn't guarantee you anything. I mean, we look at this year. This is what I go back to,
I tried to do some analysis on this, but it was taking me way too much
time.
It
takes way too much time because picks have been moved and this and that. But, if you, for example, right, you could have a lot of early round picks and you could hit on them. Wagner, he has a number 2 pick. He gets CeeDee Lamb. He ends up with Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, DJ Moore. That's a really solid first 4 picks, when especially on paper. Now, CeeDee Lamb's not, injuries and Dak and Cooper Rush. And so he's struggled a little bit. DJ Moore's been hot and cold. But Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon have been very, very steady and very good all year. So it kind of depends. We've seen in years past where somebody has multiple first round picks, does a poor job of drafting. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it does matter to some extent because it is about opportunities. The more opportunities you have, the better chances are that you hit. But none of that is guaranteed. I mean, I think, you look at Bodson's team. He takes AJ Brown instead of Saquon Barkley. Maybe he wishes he had that back, maybe not. He then takes Derrick Henry. Well, I mean, if he had Barkley and Henry, holy crap, there wouldn't really be a
There's
chance.
No conversation.
He's got Drake London, Travis Kelce. I took Travis Kelce in the second round. He's starting to come on, but he's no Noah Gray. And that's hard. It doesn't really work
but
out.
But was starting to come on. It's a floor at that position that nobody else has access to.
Sure. But to me, it's like, do you look back on that? Do you regret that? Do you not? I think those are all good picks in the moment based on how you want to construct your team. You got to look around what else is available, but do you look back and go, man, I wish I had done something different? I think it's very easy to do that. Bodson drafted very well. I think, the point is ultimately he hit on the picks he needed to hit on in a really strong way. But you can miss, right? We've seen guys before have multiple early picks and not perform well. And I agree with you. So, Paul, all that is to say is, you could have no early picks and still be good. You could have a bunch of them and be good or bad. There's no telling. And I think that, yes, you want to match. It's just like anything. It's just like in real football, right? It's about, nobody is 100% in the first round. But the more chances you have, the better the likelihood are that you hit on good players. Same thing in fantasy. And so I get it. But this year, I thought after the first few weeks and the first big trades, other than Evan eventually moving Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson, looking at the bad teams in the league, there weren't exactly a lot of assets there to go, man, that's something I really want. You could go to say, well, Manny had, Kyron Williams, but the keeper value was so immense there. There's no incentive for him to trade him.
And I tried to trade him, and he was like, it's not worth it.
And I talked to Manny multiple times. I go, I mean, I wouldn't trade Kyron or Puka, and maybe I trade Neighbors because the keeper value is so big on Puka and Kyron. Maybe you trade Neighbors just because, but without Neighbors has basically no quarterback, so it's hard to have value there, But I remember looking and I was just like, I don't see trade partners unless somebody else decides has an injury or decides, I just like if Justin got to the point at the deadline and said, I just can't do it. But in talking to him, he was like, the offers weren't good enough. At the same time, you just don't know what's going to happen. And is it really what you want to do? And it was just the way the league was set up this year is you really had, for a long time, there really were like maybe 8 teams that were all competitive and 4 bad. It really kind of morphed into 5 and 7. But there weren't assets available in the 5 at a certain point. And so for the other 7, it was kind of like, we're going to see how it plays out, And then you see Bodson's very aggressive on the waiver wire. Don't know if he ever plays many of these players. I'm always kind of amused by the tactics of, going after all these different guys every week. I just don't know that there's long-term benefit because you could do that into the playoffs. But I think looking back, it's you got to just swing and hope you hit it out. I don't know what else there is to it.
You can't listen, whether it's the waiver wire money or whether it's your team, you can't take it with you. And I think it's been exciting to have a season where I don't know if it's ever been this close before, whether it's granted we're 2 weeks out, but it feels like, you throw me in there, but other than me, really, these 5 teams at the top, if anybody went ahead and won, I would not be surprised to see anybody from these top teams come through. Anybody, to me, you could make a good case for here, especially coming out of your division. I think LaMagna's got a little bit more of a question mark, but listen, Tyrone Tracy's been playing amazing. What a huge pickup that's been.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think
the bench lacks depth, but
I think most teams don't have bench depth, and it's always something I struggle with. But that is very intentional. I had all these picks, and I was like, I want to have a lot of depth. The problem that I find then is you get into weeks and you go, who do I want to play? And you start really trying to overanalyze matchups, weather. Last week I thought about taking out McCaffrey and Kittle, but I had played Hunt in flex at the flex position, and so when that was a 1:00 game, which is poor construction on my part. So I couldn't move McCaffrey to put in somebody else. Now, I don't think it changes the outcome of the week, but at the end of the day, having depth, I think sometimes is analysis, paralysis by analysis, right? You have too much, you're trying to analyze it too much. For LaMagna, this team can win, right? Josh Allen, Nico Collins, Kenneth Walker, Bijan Robinson, Tyreek Hill, any of them can win you a week. Tyrone Tracy's playing well. Evan Ingram's,
on Jacksonville.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? It's tight end. Denver defense certainly can put up points. I mean, I don't think any of the 6 teams or 7 teams that we expect to be in the playoffs are incapable of winning. Yes, would I say that Bodson, especially if he's the 1 seed, should be favored? Of course, because he gets a bye. He has, assuming there aren't injuries late in the year, but he has probably the strongest team, at least from a starting lineup perspective. But I think that all of the teams have that potential to win. And at some point, the points for is a useful metric to gauge sort of your overall performance. But I think it's also more telling if you look, how is somebody doing lately? What are we expecting here as we kind of get to the end of the year where there's fewer buys or maybe less weeks where you have a lot of bye week problems? So I look at it as any of the 6 or 7 would be capable. I do think, odds should shift, right? Wagner is a little more boom bust. LaMagna, now that he's healthy, let's see. But I do worry because sometimes, the Bills sometimes decide to not throw the ball, or Tyreek Hill doesn't get the ball. There's just weeks where weird things happen. But I think LaMagna is stronger than what his points for shows. I think Joe is certainly a strong team. Everybody has that potential. If we go down the line, we could say this is a strong position or this is a weak position. I don't think any of that matters. The other day is if Saquon can go for 50 points, right? Like Lamar can go 50 points, anything's possible, right? Yeah. Should I have a better record than 8-4? Probably. But that doesn't really matter because all you are where we are. We are. Yeah. You got to just win, right? We see it all the time in real football. You see it. Alabama lost 24-3 to Oklahoma. I mean, nobody saw that coming, but you got to play the game.
Right.
It's the same thing. So, looking ahead though, we're 2 weeks out. What do you think the playoff order is? I mean, we could probably put Dodson in a 1 seed in Penn. I just don't see there's any way he doesn't end up there.
The only way he doesn't get that is if he loses both games, and that's not going to happen with what he's got.
Well, he probably has to lose both games to for sure not get it. Yeah. But even losing one, it depends, right? It's just what if Amon-Ra goes down in the first snap of the game? Things can happen, but most likely we're going to put him in at 1, 2 to 6. How do you see that?
I want to manifest that I'm going to be 2. I just do not believe that is possible. I believe that you will end up getting the 2 seed. I just think it's going to happen. I think the depth of your team, the matchups that you face in these last few weeks are just so great. I think you've got 2, which puts me in at the 3. I'm going to expect Joe Richmond to come in at 4. And then depending on how the matchups break out, it's just, I think it's exactly where it sits right now, where it's going to be between LaMagna and Wagner for 5 and 6. I don't believe Kirshner gets in. It also depends because I haven't done the math of what happens with all the matchups and who wins what, but I just don't see a way Kirshner can get in. He's got to win out. And I would not bet on winning out in your division.
I think for Kirshner, the problem is he still has Joe. So he has Joe this week. I think the way our division matchups went, I'm not that you want to pick. It's not like you feel like one is necessarily easier than
Right.
the other, right? But Joe is always kind of my Achilles heel, so I get that out of the
I think
way. And
Joe's the
it's
league's Achilles heel.
yeah, sure. So that's also very true. But looking for for Justin, I think that that's true. I would say is probably going to be my guess is it'll be Bodzin in the one. I will say I'll say myself in the two, but I'm not confident in that. I could very well see Joe in the two. You'll be the three. If I'm in the two, then I think it's certainly going to be Joe. And I'll go LaMagna six, LaMagna five, Wagner six.
Oh, I'd love for that to happen. That'd be
Um,
great. Thank you.
although, the problem for LaMagna is he's still got to play Bodson, right? So I guess that therein lies kind of the difficulty in this. I think LaMagna can beat Bodson, and I don't know what that matchup looks like, but for the sake of chaos, why not? I think if that actually in that situation, it's probably still Bodson at the one, me at the two, you at the three, Joe at the four. And like I said, I think LaMagna, I think, can win out, and Wagner doesn't win out. Their points are so beautifully close
Right.
where if Wagner loses out, he's probably still going to be in. But I'd like to see some chaos here. I don't want to see it the way it
Please.
looks now. 2 weeks.
No, I think when you look at what the matchups are, this is very much going to be decided in the last week of the season. And I'll project out as to say, if it falls that you get the 2 seed, I think it's you and Bodson in the finals. And I think Bodson wins. Just looking at both of your respective matchups, he's got a much more favorable season week 17 schedule.
The only thing for him week 17 is he's got the Lions at the Niners on Monday Night Football. And I'd be done. Well, no, I mean, I've had Kittle and McCaffrey. And for the Niners, even if their season is done, and I very well suspect the Niners might be eliminated from the playoffs by the time we get to that game matters to them.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if the Niners kind of tank some other things and focus a whole hell of a lot on that matchup. And I wouldn't mind a shootout for the championship with Bodson.
I think you're correct me if I'm wrong. I think the issue for you is you got 2 guys going up against Cincinnati plays Denver in week 17, and that Denver defense can put up points from time to time, cause some turnovers, which could be an issue. And then you do have McCaffrey against Detroit, which is it going to be, I'm playing with the heart and I go off and have a great game, or is that defense going to shut him down? Who knows?
Yeah, but I've got Saquon against Dallas.
That's also
and I could also play Jaden Daniels against the Falcons. So I agree. Do I want to go into that matchup and be playing Burrow and maybe Higgins? I don't love that prospect, but in part trading for Jaden Daniels that's at least
giving yourself
that gives me a higher floor at backup quarterback. Burrow's been unreal, and really should be in the MVP conversation, but I kind of like some of the matchups if we get to that point. But I agree. On paper, Botson has the better matchups that week. Don't get me wrong. It's a matter of that would be fun if, I mean, look, we had that happen 2 years ago, and a player did die on the field.
I got to take this call. Sorry.
Uh-oh.
It's UPS.
UPS strikes again. So, we'll filibuster here until we get our guests back. The chat wasn't aware that LaMagna and Wagner were so close on points 4. Just to break it down, the difference is 1.3 total points on the year, which is remarkably close. We're literally 0.1 in the decimal places. Remarkable, really. 12 weeks in that they're that close. We've had the closest matchup in league history this year. Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting here. Finish, but let's take some questions from the chat. So if you're in the chat, let's take a couple of questions here while we wait for our guests to return so we can wrap up. Just looking at Fantasy Pros, so we want to talk playoff odds. Justin's got 18% chance to make the playoffs. Championship odds, Bod's at 35%. I'm at 25%. And then Joe at 13, and then everyone else from there is 10, 7, and 9%. You all can try to figure out and debate what percentage there applies to each team. I think looking ahead to this week, let's do some quick matchup breakdown. I'm sure Joe will win, just kind of how the nature of that goes. I wouldn't be surprised to see Joe sneak into the 2 seed here and win out. He's definitely got some good matchups. At the same time, Lamar could have a huge day against the Eagles. What's going to be a shootout, big game for both teams. Kirschner's got to make some lineup changes. Dobbins is probably not going to play with an MCL injury. That's a huge hit to him, but Mike Evans could find his groove coming back now from his own injury. Just got to make some lineup changes. Got to put Jamar Chase in there. He's got to find a running back. He only has two. Well, he's got three running backs, but he's going to have to make some changes to his lineup. But for Joe, let's see. If Justin Jefferson can actually be a top receiver this week, between him, Cup, JSN, McBride, those are very strong pass catchers. So, certainly we'll lean Joe there. The
We're back.
We're back. So the guest is back. We have a question of when did the division names change and whether there should be an impeachment.
When did they change?
Well, they changed last week. So I do have to apologize. I think it's totally fair. I mean, look, we sent out the video link for the podcast in real time when it happens. If you don't watch it live or on replay, that's on you. It was posted late to audio, but it's been available. It was discussed. Division of Death, and then we thought because the other two divisions, the guest last week and I, that the divisions really are kind of cupcakes, that we should name them Georgetown Cupcake and Sprinkles, and that's what we did. So if you don't like the cupcake purveyor that you're assigned to,
I do think Sprinkles should perhaps be maybe a baked and wired. Wasn't that
Oh, that's a good. We should do that as well.
DC bake.
Okay, that's fine. We can. You know what? That's a good change. We'll do that. We'll do that when we get off the air here. As far as whether we should impeach, yeah, that's not going to happen.
No.
Honestly, if you would rather have someone else as commissioner, gladly take the responsibilities and the duties. I don't want it. It's. I think I'm more than fair and impartial, but I'm all for new management if that's what the will of the people is. I'm not a dictator.
Never had major issues. We've had one.
I don't know. I mean, it depends. Does it affect your team or not? Whether you call it a major issue. I think we have now gone a couple of years in a row without like really giant issues. Obviously, 2 years ago, how would you decided to champion because what happened on the very last game of the year was unique. But we have had from time to time, and not necessarily every year, but time to time, like some significant or controversial things happen. Not necessarily from something I did, but just in general, they occur. And now, what are we doing? But there's very few. I mean, I don't know if there's ever really been an instance of a trade being vetoed. I've allowed trades to go through that I think are imbalanced. I've allowed trades to go through that I forgot I had even offered. So again, very fair. But if the will of the people is for new management, I will gladly step aside. This is not a dictatorship at all. This is not Soviet or post-Soviet Russia. Yeah, I don't know. So anyway, we'll certainly bake and wire. That's a very good call. That's a very good call for division name. And we'll do that. Any other closing thoughts here? We leave the people. Here we go. What's the dessert thought for this podcast? Thanksgiving, obviously dessert's a big component of that. Leave us with something sweet to fill our bellies here as we go into the holiday.
Something sweet for you. One, I just finished a key lime pie before I came over. Number two, if you want a fun storyline, if I managed to win the league, we would have back-to-back champions. LaMagna's co-championship as well as a solo championship, and then myself winning in 23 and 24. So a fun bit of history to root for, and also a chance for another well-organized destination draft in 2025.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. If Bodson wins, I wonder where Bodson will want to draft. I think we've been to a lot of different places. Certainly curious what happens there. I know people are interested to see how did the results of this year affect the power rankings, right? Does Paul fall farther?
I have started to manipulate that a little bit. It's been a lot of fun for me.
I'm sure you have, especially kind of certain teams are just not going to be there at the end, so we can kind of put them down in the basement and forget about them. I am definitely curious how that matters. My team is always sort of like okay, but never good enough, or never certainly doesn't get the win. I would like to change that this year. Frankly, I'm sure I'll find a way to screw it up. It's generally what happens. I overthink it, just like last week. I think I have to show you this. I think I've been second almost half of the matchups this year. I've been second the last 3 weeks.
I think I think I have 4 or 5 seconds, and so do you.
I've been second 5 times, third another 2 times, and first once. So 8 of 12 weeks, I've been in the top 3, which is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I think I'm 6 or 7.
Yeah, I mean, last week the luck score is -91, which is just about as much out of 100, almost as much as you can get there, to lose by a little more than 7 points, and again, be a number two in points. So for me, I'm excited to see how it plays out. I like that I've established a high floor. It's kind of what I like, what I wanted with my team, try to eliminate some of the inconsistencies. Um, but yeah, it's going to be fun. We're going to
Yeah.
see
I
how it
hope we
all
have
shakes out.
some more close games to end the season. It's been a thriller to have so many, in the past 2 weeks, we've had 3 games decided by 3 points or
Well,
less.
we had the closest matchup, I think,
Close matches
in
ever,
league
that
history.
tenth of a point. That was
That
great.
was that was wild. To
Fun
see
to
something.
watch the chat blow up during that. I mean, even, I assumed he would always win, but even Bodson having to make up against Paul on Monday night. And yeah, he won by 6, but still, it gave us a lot to be invested in that matchup, which was fun.
Yeah, anytime Paul pulls an upset, I think the league should be heavily invested in that, because it's fun. Paul would have won 2 weeks in a row if that happened. So you never
Historic.
know.
Historic
For his
the year.
team,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Should have had extra points added to the power rankings analysis. So, all right, we'll leave it there, though. Hopefully, anyone who catches this while they're traveling enjoys it. And I appreciate having, like I said, our once a year